15 types of Monstera to grow. Monsteras are some of the most iconic, easily recognizable, and on-trend houseplants. The lush, tropical-looking foliage of these vining plants comes complete with eye-catching, unique holes, fenestrations, in mature specimens. As an added bonus, despite their exotic look, they're surprisingly easygoing, and even beginner indoor plant enthusiasts can nurture these beauties without too much effort. Don't forget, though, it takes time for the dramatic fenestration to develop on young plants, and they aren't a great choice if you have curious pets that like to explore with their mouths. Monsteras contain insoluble calcium oxalates that are highly toxic to dogs and cats. Although there are close to 50 species in the Monstera genus, only a handful are available via local plant nurseries and retailers. Several species, cultivars, and variegated varieties are growing in popularity, but others are rare and expensive. If you want to make an impression with a Monstera in your home, check out the list below, including some of the common and more hard-to-come-by, enthusiast-only options. 1. Monstera deliciosa. The most readily available and well-known of all the Monstera species, the Monstera deliciosa is the one you're most likely to see in Instagrammable designer homes. The large foliage of the mature plants has striking fenestration, and this exotic-looking plant is super easy to grow indoors. Individual leaves grow to be up to 3 feet long, and with their upward vining growth habit and aerial roots, it grows best up against a pole or trellis. When grown in the right climate outdoors, you might see creamy flowers and then edible, juicy fruit that attracts pollinators and other wildlife to your yard. Native area, South and Central America. USDA growing zones, 10 to 12. Height, 10 to 15 feet tall. Sun exposure, bright indirect sunlight, partial shade. 2. Monstera acuminata. If you're lucky enough to find this rare species, it's a great choice for small, tight four-space apartments or for trailing overhanging baskets. It looks similar to Monstera adansonii, but the foliage and height are more compact. Native area, South and Central America. USDA growing zones, 10 to 12. Height, up to 7 feet when grown outdoors. Sun exposure, bright indirect sunlight, partial shade. 3. Swiss cheese plant. Sometimes called the Swiss cheese or monkey mask plant, this Monstera species comes in as runner-up in terms of popularity and availability after the Monstera deliciosa. Although it's a bit smaller, it can still reach heights of up to 8 feet when grown indoors and has a climbing, fast-developing growth habit which may benefit from occasional trimming. Given its common name, it's no surprise that the Swiss cheese plant has impressive foliage fenestration when mature. Native area, South and Central America. USDA growing zones, 10 to 12. Height, up to 8 feet indoors. Sun exposure, partial sun. 4. Monstera dubia. This lesser-known variegated Monstera species, sometimes called the shingle plant, has small heart-shaped leaves. The vining habit results in the foliage lying close to whatever its stems are trailing up against. Although it can grow in low light conditions, bright, indirect light produces more eye-catching variegation. This is one of the species you'll probably only find at a higher price via specialist suppliers. Although mature plants do develop fenestration, those grown at home are likely to remain in their solid juvenile state. Native area, South and Central America. USDA growing zones, 9 to 11. Height, up to 3 feet tall. Sun exposure, partial sun. 5. A Monstera peru, Monstera carstenianum. If you can get your hands on this rare climbing species, you won't have to worry about it being hard to care for or taking up too much space. This small member of the genus grows quickly and vigorously in the right conditions. However, unlike many other Monstera species, Peru doesn't develop fenestrations on its leaves. Despite this, the thick foliage has eye-catching deep ridges and a glossy dark green color. Native area, South and Central America. USDA growing zones, 10B to 12B. Height, 6 to 8 feet. Sun exposure, part shade. 6. Monstera obliqua. One of the rarest of the Monstera species, the obliqua is sometimes called the unicorn plant. When mature, it has extreme fenestration and the holes can take up to 90% of the leaf surface. Their wafer-thin structure makes them exceptionally delicate, and they are also difficult to find in the wild. It's doubtful you'll be lucky enough to find this plant, even from the best specialists, and, if you do, it may cost a small fortune, but, for the keenest species enthusiasts, it's nice to dream. Native area, South and Central America. USDA growing zones, 9 to 11. Height, 6 to 10 feet outdoors. Sun exposure, partial sun. 7. Monstera pinnatipartita. Rather than fenestration on the mature foliage, this Monstera species gets its name from its pinnate, feather-like mature, large, and glossy leaves. Harder to find than the likes of the deliciosa or adansonii, you may be lucky to find one of these exotic beauties online. Native area, South and Central America. USDA growing zones, 11 to 12. Height, up to 6 feet when grown indoors. Sun exposure, partial sun. 8. Silver Monstera, Monstera siltepecana. It's all about the unusual color of the Monstera siltepecana, and, encouragingly, it is more widely available than some of the other rare varieties on this list. The solid, young, and lance-shaped foliage are blue-silvery gray with green veins. Mature leaves are dark, glossy green with fenestration and a climbing habit. If you buy a juvenile plant, you'll enjoy the silver coloring for at least a couple of years. Native area, South and Central America. USDA growing zones, 11 to 12. Height, up to 6 feet indoors. Sun exposure, bright indirect sunlight, partial shade. 9. Monstera standleyana. This rare, compact Monstera species stands out for its unusual and unpredictable individual foliage color variations. Look out for speckles, splotches, and stripes in yellow, cream, or white against glossy green. Also known as the five holes plant, it won't always develop fenestration in an indoor environment. Native area, South and Central America. USDA growing zones, 9 to 11. Height, up to 5 feet tall indoors. Sun exposure, bright indirect sunlight, partial shade. 10. Monstera deliciosa constellation. This highly sought-after, lab-cultured Monstera is undoubtedly stunning. The splotchy, creamy white, and yellow pattern on the fenestrate foliage results in a unique form of variegation that, for some enthusiasts, makes it a worthwhile investment. Although it is one of the more widely available variegated varieties, it still has a pretty high price tag. Native area, NA. USDA growing zones, 10 to 12. Height, up to 8 feet indoors. Sun exposure, bright indirect sunlight, partial shade. 11. Monstera deliciosa Albo borsigiana Variegated. Another highly sought-after, compact, expensive, and variegated deliciosa variety, Albo has a striking, irregular coloration on the foliage. It looks similar to constellation, but the splotchy white patterns can develop to be pure white on some leaves of mature specimens. Native area, South and Central America. USDA growing zones, 10 to 12. Height, up to 6 feet indoors. Sun exposure, bright indirect sunlight, partial shade. 12. Variegated Monstera deliciosa. Variegated varieties are always high on any Monstera enthusiast's list. But, because they are so tricky and slow to propagate, they are rare and expensive. The deliciosa variegata has naturally occurring variegation as a result of a genetic mutation. The unpredictability of this mutation means it is still tough to come by. Native area, South and Central America. USDA growing zones, 10 to 12. Height, 10 to 15 feet tall. Sun exposure, bright indirect sunlight, partial shade. 13. Monstera peru, variegated. If you're looking for a compact Monstera with beautiful individual patterns on its thick foliage, consider the variegated variety of the Monstera peru. Just remember that this plant won't develop fenestrations on its foliage regardless of how mature it is. Native area, South and Central America. USDA growing zones, 10B to 12B. Height, 6 to 8 feet. Sun exposure, part shade. 14. Mini Monstera, Rhaphidophora tetrasperma. This plant is an honorary Monstera. Although its common name, care requirements, and appearance could lead you to believe it is part of the genus, this compact little species with distinctive fenestrate foliage is actually part of the Rhaphidophora genus. It's a perfect option if you are looking for a low-maintenance and easy-to-find alternative. Native area, Africa, Asia. USDA growing zones, 9 to 12. Height, 6 to 8 feet tall indoors. Sun exposure, partial shade. 15. Monstera lechleriana. This is one of the hardiest and fastest growing Monstera species, with larger foliage than the similar Adansonii. The small holes of the Monstera lechleriana develop in the center of the leaves. If you can get your hands on one of these plants, you'll probably have to provide it with some support and make sure it has plenty of space to expand. Native area, South and Central America. USDA growing zones, 10 to 12. Height, up to 6 feet when grown indoors. Sun exposure, part shade. For instructions that are more detailed and many more plant tips, we recommend Leaf Town on YouTube.